It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, February 26th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content. It has a lot of questions after the weekend back to back, Russ.
A ton of questions.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Russ, I am frustrated about the losses to the New York Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins for very different reasons. I think they were very different games, but I think there's a lot you can take away from what went down in these two games. And I think I want to start with some positives here because there were some positives. I do think that really, if there was a microcosm of the Flyers this season and how resilient they are and how they can hang with anybody in the league, these two games showed it, I think. With the Rangers being as quote unquote good as they are, which I disagree with now. But
no, they're good. I think
they're overrated. I think
I don't think so.
Based on how the Flyers played against them, I don't think they had a good game overall. I think Shesterkin is phenomenal.
Well, but I mean that's big part of their team. The thing is this: you could hang with these teams and yes, be resilient, and all those things are good. But when you have to play teams like this in a 7-game series, that's when things really change. So being able to hang with them on a Wednesday night or a Saturday afternoon doesn't mean you're as good as them. I think there's a big difference with that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I said could hang with them. I did not say as good as them. I think
no, but I am not going to say that. Oh, well, look, just because they only lost by one, they're close to being that good. They're not.
But I would also like to say I did say we were starting out with positives, so you can't flip to the negative.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, look, on the positive, Ali Lixell had a great game against Pittsburgh. That's nice. He got put in there because he had to get put in there, and I'm glad they did it.
Yes.
Was it a day late and a dollar short? Absolutely. No question about it. But yeah, that part was good. You could start with all the other positives because there's not that many more.
Well, I think there was. So to continue the Ali Lixell thing, I think he's handled himself so just tremendously with all of this, not getting played on the Flyers. He gets sent down for one game. We'll get into it more on tomorrow's show when we talk about the Phantoms, but 2 goals and 2 assists in his one game with the Phantoms. So kind of a good day for him. And then he gets back into the Flyers lineup, and I think he contributed pretty solidly in the game against the Pens and looked like he belonged there.
Yeah, he's one of the best skaters for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that Tyson Forster is looking great. I think that, he did get banged up a little bit with the block shot again.
No, he looked good.
But he looked really good. And Scott Lawton is continuing to impress. I think that you could say that there was that sort of missed net against the Rangers, and that was a big deal, and I don't discount that, but you look at the overall quality of his play over the last month or so, and especially this weekend, I think there's a lot to it, and I think he's becoming like the backbone of that PK in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree with all those things. Like Lawton, did well. I mean, guys are going to miss empty nets. Now, does this whole team miss too many nets? Yeah, for sure. But yeah, Lawton was really good too.
Yeah, I think so. And so I think that there's a lot of good there. There were nuggets of really good moments in both games. I thought that the Flyers did a tremendous job of shutting down the Rangers in what they normally do in a lot of ways. And I just think that there were some
For parts
definite,
of that game, they did. There were
yeah,
other. It was not for the whole game or even for a whole period, but they had moments. They had stretches, like 8, 9 minute stretches.
yeah, I mean, just the fact that Zibanejad didn't get a hat trick in the game, I think is a minor miracle,
That's
just
funny.
because that seems to happen. But I do think that there was a lot of good, which is what makes the not so good, I think, frustrating, right? Because like sorry to Cal Peterson, it's not really his fault in the grand scheme of things. He's where he is because of greater issues than himself, right?
Right.
I do think, there was a lot of conversation on social during the Pittsburgh game about, oh, they should have, called up Felix Sandstrom and what is Cal Peterson doing in this game? And it's all his fault. And I'd have to say, no, it's not all his fault because there was some poor play in front of him with not getting the puck out that I think, was a problem. But I also think that Felix Sandstrom isn't much better. If you look at the numbers, they're just not there. I've watched almost all the Phantoms games this season. He's not playing generally very well. I literally watched a game earlier that day on replay that he didn't look great in. So, except for one huge save that was phenomenal, but on a 2-on-0. But, he's just not gonna get you much better on average. I think could he come up and do great things? Maybe. But I just it's not a guarantee that Sandstrom would be any better.
No, and we've been pretty consistent with that. Really, Peterson and Sandstrom, when they're in the AHL, are basically the same goalie this year. Now,
Yep.
again, we talked about it. Think if Sandstrom's season got off to a better start and he played with these guys right away, he would be better. But he's not.
Yes.
So there really is no answer to this. And I know it's frustrating for fans, but we talked about it. When they lost Carter Hart, there wasn't going to be an answer for this. There just wasn't.
Right.
But that's
And
not
we
really
have
why they lost this game, though.
no.
There were a lot of other things that went on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would say that that is not a grand solution there. And we have said consistently, like Russ was just alluding to, that you just stick with this situation through this season. We're in the rebuild.
Yep.
This playoff race is, a nice thing that's happening. But I think that Briere and Jones are right that you stay the course. And when it comes to a goaltender, the Flyers are going to be better off trying to find somebody on the open market this offseason to fill that other role and let Urson learn how to be this number one goalie for the rest of this season.
Right.
Right.
This is his way of learning, and it's not, going to be pretty because they can't burn him out down the stretch. You don't learn that way. So they couldn't play him back to back. I understand why they left Peterson in. We all knew he
Yep.
was going to be left in, but there was a strategy that was employed by this team for the two games. And we said, hey, this is probably their most important weekend of the year. And the strategy failed. Like, it completely failed. A lot of things failed. So when I'm allowed to talk about that, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I do think, there's a couple big questions in terms of the lineup, which I think is probably one of the things you want to talk about. And so we will get into those questions, including the Lixell call up versus Bobby Brink, Stahl versus Zamula, and what to do with Cam Atkinson. And we are going to talk about all of those and all the other stuff Russ wants to mention coming up next.
Our sponsor today is Camino Consulting. You've heard of our online families and couples course and taking the advantage of the locked on 25% discount running to the end of the month. But what about the live seminars? In both sports and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurables and qualifications, but we all know the intangibles that matter when those things are similar. Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group. It's one of the most effective you've ever seen, both because you've identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them in accord with their own preferences. But you aren't in business management or working in a team, we pay referrals. Make some money making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works together better at the end of year one than it does at week one. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding.
On tomorrow's show, we will be talking Lehigh Valley Phantoms. They had a wild weekend that definitely had playoff implications. So we will get into that. Plus, we will have a mailbag later this week. So get those questions in via email at lockedonflyers@gmail. You can send us a message on Twitter or comment on our YouTube channel. So, Russ, I think with Travis Konechny out for these 2 games, and we're not sure what this means for the next set of games that the Flyers are going into. Our top scorer, it's tough to play these 2 games without him. So they had to make some decisions about the lineup, and there was some strategy around it with 11-7 and then a 12-6. Ali Lixel versus Bobby Brink, Stahl and Zamula. So what was your take on all of that given Travis Konechny's absence?
Okay. So before all of it ever started, I was like, you shouldn't go 11-7 against the Rangers, especially when you got to play the Penguins, because if you don't beat the Penguins, that's funny. If you don't beat the Rangers, you're going to possibly run out of gas against the Penguins. And so part of that happened. And so it's like, I didn't understand why they did that. Now you're without Konechny. So the question is, where was all the scoring going to come from? And yeah, they could have put Lixell in on the first game, but they didn't. They waited. They waited until they lost, and then they called him up. I'm also going to tell you what's preventing them from bringing in Bobby Brink instead of Cam Atkinson, who basically is playing 10 minutes of rudderless hockey again. And, he's had a couple of weeks where he's been good on and off, but he's really not helping them right now. He's got the worst plus minus on the team. Brink would not be making all these mistakes. And Brink was scoring points close to the same way Cam Atkinson was, and he was better at least making plays, making something happen. Atkinson's not doing any of that.
Right. I think that, in a vacuum, we have said, or before Travis Konechny was out, we have said that we didn't want Brink back up too quickly
Right.
because there was a lot that he had to learn. And I still agree with that. But I think if there's an absolute need, he's the guy you call up.
Yeah.
And it feels like this is an absolute need now with Konechny out. I think if Konechny's in, you don't need to call him up. And you can
Correct.
still sit Atkinson if you want to.
Right.
And play Lixell. And I think that we've seen that Ali Lixell can hang. And so I don't have any problem with that. But yeah, call Brink up if you feel like there's the need and you're willing to sit Atkinson, because at this point, I feel like you should.
Yeah, there's definitely the need for more offense without Konechny. I think we'd all be lying if we didn't say that Konechny was and is the catalyst for the last 2 years for this team for their scoring when he's out.
Especially against the Pens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even close, right? So, okay. So there's that. So then against the Penguins, you chose Mark Stahl over Zamula. There's never any defense for that. And to Mike Sullivan's credit, even though he was getting as mad as John Tortorella, I was enjoying how mad both coaches were getting.
Oh my God.
It did make me laugh because they used to be on the same staff, right? When I first broke
Right.
into the league and I was covering the Rangers, they were on the same staff. So, but what was making this worse was they were matching up Sidney Crosby on Mark Stahl. They made sure of that, and it
Yep.
helped them. And it's like, listen, Igor Zamula would have been good as well, because when Drysdale went out, he still could have helped the failing power play, which is failing even worse now. I mean, let me ask you this question, just off the top of your head, and I understand they had some injuries. Why in the world would you have 3 players trying to make a zone entry? I saw 3 guys trying to make a zone entry. little pass, little pass, little pass. Like, what are you doing?
No, that is not the way. It is
And the
not the
Penguins
way.
were they were right over the red
Yep.
line. They were standing there waiting to knock it away. They made it so easy at times.
And especially on that double minor,
Yes.
uh, like that sequence, that whole, I would say 2.5 to 45,
Yeah.
where the Flyers just couldn't get anything going. That was a huge indicator of what you're talking
Yeah.
about
And I don't
right
blame
now.
Frost for the penalty. He did the penalty because he figured it was going to be a sure goal. So that's why.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a dumb penalty. It was like, am I going to let this guy go right in on the goalie? And he decided not to. But you could tell that on the penalty kill, the Flyers were running out of steam. And the more they went on the penalty kill, because of the way yesterday went and everything else, that this was going to make it even harder. And I listen, they have all the guts in the world. I get it. But I don't think the coaching staff did them any favors with the situations they put them in and everything else. I just, I'd like to know the last time we said, hey, this coaching staff X's and O's really beat the other team. It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the player-driven team right now
Yes, it
that
is.
all of the good, I would say a large part of the good. Now, I'm gonna take the penalty kill out of the conversation here because I think, even though the penalty kill, like, wasn't at the top of its game versus Pittsburgh, I think that overall it's been the shining star of
It
this
has.
season for the Flyers, so I'm not gonna disparage that in any way. But I would say other than that, yes, I think there's been some issues with matchups. There's been issues with lineup choices. I don't necessarily think there's been, I think they're doing mostly okay with setting the individual forward lines. I think it's just looking at the lineup overall that's been a problem
Yeah.
and the structure of it. I do think that there's been some good defensive work overall this season. But again, I think it's failed at key moments. And so I think that it's an adjustment problem. It's not an initial strategy problem overall on the defensive side of things.
Yeah. Something else, uh, again, and this will just continue to drive me crazy, are the missed shots. And they have so many of them. And they're actually, what's interesting is they're kind of like in the middle of the league for it. It looks like, without counting, actually, maybe even a little higher. They might be like 12th best, 13th best. Uh, but I got to tell you, it's just they miss them at the wrong times. They do create some real good chances and miss open nets just all the time. And it's not even just Lawton, it's a lot of guys. But it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like they focus on shooting drills or shooting practice. And I'd like to say once again, like I was telling a newer reporter, a skills coach is nice. A shooting coach is a little more direct, and you could get one. And what would this team be like with one? Because, and again, somebody should talk to Owen Tippett in the sense that you got to change up your move, man. The whole league knows it. The goalies are getting ready. They all know how to get to the post, and they're waiting for you. They're waiting for you because they know you're not going to pass it either. Like somebody has to talk to them and just change it up. Those kinds of things would be great. That's what prevents him from being like a 35 goal scorer right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think again, having Travis Konechny there would have changed things a bit because there've been
Hmm.
more than one weapon like that out there to have to react to, and I think that would have helped in both games. I think again, it's hard to do this against a goalie like Shesterkin. So I'm not faulting
Sure.
them as much for this in the Rangers game, but in the Pens game in particular, not getting a ton of chances net front, especially when Jarry was just not having a great game. I think that you look at a lot of their shot attempts, and they were from distance. I just think that again, shot selection could have been a lot better, especially on the power
So
play.
here's some Owen Tippett numbers. For this year, in 54 games, he has attempted 390 shots. Last year, in 77 games, he attempted 400. He attempted 414 shots. So last year he hit 231 on goal and he got 27 goals. This year 211, so it is a little higher, but the shot percentage, even though my math isn't great, it's a little lower somehow. 10% compared to 11.7. It could be better than that. And that's why he goes through these stretches. But he's taken attempting way more shots, but it's kind of like if you just got him on net, right? Some of the rebounds, you'll be getting more points from it. He doesn't have that many assists because when you miss the net, you have no rebound attempt. So these are things, and it's not just him. Now Forster, I think, is improved um, in
Right.
shooting from the high percentage areas.
Yes.
Tippett is
And
not improved in that.
that's why Forster is finding more success now, is because he is, shooting from like more high danger areas. And I think he's being more deliberate about his shot than he was before. And he's creating like the one of the goals he scored versus Pittsburgh. I think he was very deliberate in
Yes.
in the shot he took and the placement of it. So I think I think there's a lot to that there. Yeah, so I do think overall with these two games, again, there was a lot of little moments of good and good team play,
Sure.
but it wasn't 100%. And I do think that it brings up these questions we're talking about in terms of overarching strategy for this team that, we hope that they can, you know, really just sit back for a moment and maybe think about things a little bit bigger picture instead of game to game the way Torts likes to talk about it.
Yeah, and I felt like the broadcast didn't get it as far as what the Flyers should be doing. So I'm going to say what they should be doing. Danny Briere should talk to John Tortorella, and if he wants Keith Jones there, that's fine. And say, hey, listen, you keep trying to win. You've done some great things this year, but when trades they're going to be made. It could be next week. It could be at the deadline. But just know that I'm going to be calling you or tapping you on the shoulder, and you're going to be losing some players, and then you're going to have to work with some other players from Lehigh. That's how this season's going to go, unless we make a hockey trade or something, and that's it. Like that's what he needs to tell them. There's
Yep.
nothing else to tell them. They're not going to go get a third goalie. They're not going to keep Walker because now Drysdale might be injured. All that does is kill any momentum you're trying to do to get young players playing time by saying things like that. So again, that's where that part has to carry through. That part's got to carry through no matter how painful it gets, just because you are in a playoff spot and it may slip away. But again, do you want to be a team that, is in the playoffs every year, gets to the conference final every few years, or you want to be a team that's going to, put it all on the line this year, go to the playoffs, and maybe never hit the playoffs again for 3 or 4 years? Because that happens too.
New York Islanders had a moment and then it was just suddenly gone.
Right.
So I get it. All right. We are going to have our nemesis of the week because it is Monday. I can't wait to get into that, and we will do it coming up next. It is definitely an important point in the season, Flyers fans, as we've been talking about. The team is in this playoff hunt, but regardless of where we end up in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. You can also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball, which is back. And entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether NHL superstars like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, who we don't love, or Austin Matthews, plus Flyers stars like Travis Konechny will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail those picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On like us, plus our national shows covering every league like Locked On NHL. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. Russ, before we get into our nemesis, just a quick end of season report for Matvey Michkov.
Okay.
Um, he did not get appointed in his final game of the season, but wound up with 19 goals, 22 assists for 41 points in 48 games. And, it's not like destroying the league numbers, but for a rookie, best ever draft +1 season in the KHL. So I'd say like overall pretty good year for him.
Yeah, very successful year in a men's league. Uh, Next year we'll see if he can play with the top club, and then have an even a bigger year. That's what you want. You want progression. So very good year.
Yeah, absolutely. Please. And we'll get more into it on another show down the road, checking in with all our Flyers prospects. But as far as our nemesis of the week, last week we talked about staying calm about everything until the trade deadline. And that was really for me and not for anybody else. Just so that, it's like you can't get caught up in all of the day to day in terms of the trade deadline and what the Flyers might or might not do. You just kind of got to ride the wave and, um, you know, put, Briere and Jones have to put their money where their mouth is and continue the rebuild, and they'll make the moves that they think are going to set the team up for the future. Now, I think the nemesis for me this week, especially given the results of the weekend, is wild card land, because wild card land is not a place you want to be in the Eastern Conference.
No.
It is ugly. It is tough. It involves Detroit. It involves Toronto. It involves the Islanders, the Devils, who are having their own problems.
You got to
Let's
say the
be real.
Penguins too now, because they're
Gotta
cruising
say the
back there.
Penguins too now, and wildcard land is not a happy place, and I don't want to be there, Russ.
No, I get it. Um, I'm gonna bitch about the blackout rules, because again
Always
today,
a favorite topic of mine.
yeah,
Continue.
today I thought, okay, this game's a national game. So I turn on TNT, which it says in my guide, Flyers, Flyers versus Penguins. I turn it on, and it's like, no, no, no. This game is blacked out. And I'm thinking, why? I live in South Jersey. This game is in Pittsburgh. So I go to the CSN channel, and it's showing, the Phillies, and I don't see any other channel, and there's nothing else that says Flyers Penguins. I ended up watching this game on Sportsnet, because I have an app that gets some Canadian stations. But I had to watch this game on Sportsnet. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, and I just don't get it.
It is tough. I had a similar problem with the Rangers game living in New York. So Flyers versus Rangers. It's a national TV game. But no, it's blacked out because I live in Rangers land.
Right.
So you have to go watch it on
But
MSG.
but when it's blacked out on local games, you get it. It should never be blacked out on a national game. Like ESPN Plus, we get it. It's going
Nope.
to be a blackout. You got to have ESPN Plus. I even went to ESPN Plus for this and couldn't find it. So it's like, you can't black out somebody with a national contract. How many apps are you expecting fans to buy?
Well, I have 12. So there you go. It's a mess. I hate it. I hate all of it. I will continue to yell about this. Again, especially living in New York, when I get blacked out for 3 teams.
Right.
3 teams I get blacked out for. It's ludicrous. It's 12% of my season is blacked out. 12%
It's
on
crazy.
just local broadcasts alone. So you will get no argument from me there. In the meantime, the Flyers are facing the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Caps, and the Sens this week. So it'll be a good time. Tampa's, hitting their playoff stride at the moment, and recently beat the New Jersey Devils pretty handily. We will preview that matchup on tomorrow's show along with Phantoms Tuesday. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So get those mailbag questions in via Twitter at Lockdown Flyers. You can email us at lockdownflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.